well traveled. I lace my boots, the trail begins, where trees and hills do softly spin. A quiet world of much unseen, the red earth beneath, the sky serene. Each step a dance with nature's heart, through lush green jungle, the journey starts. The winds hum songs of ancient lore, while the path to the valley gently soars. The ocean calls, its voice so clear, a whisper just for me to hear. I hike with hope, with certain pace. The ocean's kiss is my embrace. The air is fresh, the world feels wide. With every step I leave behind, the noise, the rush, the crowded gaze, to walk in peace, in nature's gaze. The path to Sela, wild and wide, a dance with earth, a gentle guide. The trees tower above with quiet grace as sunlight spills on nature's face. And when the trail begins to fade, I find my soul in the sunlight laid, a hiker's heart forever free in wild, untamed harmony. I feel that this poem clearly depicts who Logan is. Even in the short time that I've known him, he's always been a lover of the trails and of the wilderness, the jungles here of Guam, and he has taught me to love this island much more than I used to. Oh, I'd like to welcome Dave Lotz to say a few words.
Thank you for the poem. Very appropriate. It is really beautiful. I put together a bit about Logan in writing, but it seems to lack the real meaning because I've known him for ages. Today we remember a friend and a hiking icon on our island, Logan Oplinger. He was always for decades on the Saturday Boonie Stomps. Logan became a leader for the Boonie Stomps at the old USO in Petey in 1984. His quiet, unassuming, and upfront conversations, including a wealth of knowledge that focused on our island's trails, geology, and heritage. He will be missed along with his distinctive off-white hiking clothes, hiking stick, and sense of humor. Logan came to our island as a child in the 1950s, graduated from John F. Kennedy High School and from the University of Guam to embark on a career as a public health inspector for the Department of Public Health and Social Services. I can easily recall memorial experiences with Logan on our island's trails, either leading the Boonie Stomps or on our own explorations, such as to Mount Tenho to discover the World War II graffiti, or how to safely ascend at Maguagua Falls, thus avoiding the falling rock that we experienced on our first attempt. That was a fun one, believe me. Logan was many of my close friends, as he was to many of you, that we have made over the decades on Guam. He will be missed. Thank you. We do want to have others who I know are interested in making some statements. So, Louis, could you start, please?
Sure, I'll start. My name's Louis Rifkowitz. I'm a retired professor from UOG. I was there for 37 years, and just this past year I finally retired. I met Logan when I first arrived. He was a student of the former professor, Kathleen Montville-Cohn, who had retired herself. And, he just had an interest in ceramics, and I was coming in as the, quote, 3D area, so I was a new, professor, and believe me, I learned about that very quickly. And, we had ceramic sculpture and 3D design all in one room because that's what we have at the university. So we make it work. And Logan's, he started out by taking classes, okay, and then he started out auditing classes, and he was unique as a personality. I have to give him that. He was there was always anecdotes, little crazy things that he would find out, and his wealth of information never ceased to amaze me. He really had an interest in ceramics. It was unfounded, and his techniques of working were, while they weren't my techniques, they were valid and they were wonderful. And he made, as you can see here, some beautiful forms, and that's just like the tip of the iceberg. So, I've known Logan on and off for 37 years over this, and my sphere with him has been just about, sort of clay and creativity and kilns and fire and, anything to do with clay. And he was always a fixture. We had in the early 90s, when Guam was flush with funds, before the yen fell out, we would have these workshops for high school teachers. They were called like, what were they called? Creative Hands or something like that. And a lot of creative people would put on workshops, and teachers and students would get together, and we'd have a weekend of just fun. And he would make beads, and do bead firings in cans. We did raku one year. It was just a lot of fun. He had a great relationship with a number of the students that we had in our fledgling Masters in Arts program, and the students usually became high school teachers, high school art teachers. So Glenda Dean and Ann Wilson, sadly both who are deceased now, but were, very fond of Logan and were very, taken with him. His work was really unique and wonderful. He turned me on to a lifetime of hoarding. We would go to what was called the DRMO auctions, which were the military was shutting down the bases in the Philippines, so they were bringing over excess stuff all the time, and they'd publish these sheets, and we'd go down to this warehouse and scour the aisles and look at stuff, and we found some amazing things. We found brick, okay, like a whole lot of brick. We found kilns. We found potter's wheels. We found, all sorts of equipment that, I would love to have had, but I, couldn't do it. And Logan was interested in, like, the strangest things. Like, he was into metal because he had an interest in making jewelry. So brass and bronze things, they were really important. He really liked collecting those things, and that was kind of a fun thing, and it got me thinking about building a foundry at the university, even though we didn't have a foundry. So we found some brick, and we found some fiber fracks and a burner, and before you knew it, we were melting metal, and that was kind of fun. But the price of propane just kept going up, and that made it a non-viable situation. But we did build a kiln at the university, and that was a fun venture also. Sorry for just tangenting all over the place, but my mind kind of works like his, because I got married and I had a son, and our house blew down during Pangsana, and he came early, and he's Asperger, and he's on the spectrum, and he has ADHD, OCD, whatever you want to call it. And I found out, hey, so do I. And it was like a revelation, because now I look back in reflection and I go, yeah, I understand Logan through a whole different filter, through a whole different perception, And, I just wish that I had known, all of us had known, it was like a growing up and a big reveal and everything. But anyway, back to what we were talking about. We built a kiln, and he helped me with the design motifs. We were talking about it and how to build a kiln and a wood kiln, and there was a lot of input from a lot of people. we couldn't have a wood kiln at the university. It just wouldn't work. Safety protocol would not have a wood-fired kiln at the university, which is so sad because we live amongst all these cultures, you know, in the Asian Pacific Rim that all have ceramic cultures. And if we build it, they would come, you know, they would come and visit, they would partake, it would grow a community of like-minded, creative people. Yeah. Anyway, I tried that. I brought my sensei out from Japan and, you know, had him here for a while, but that's a whole other story and it's not Logan related. But anyway, we built this kiln and then we tried to find a sustainable way to fire it, and it ended up starting out as waste oil. You know, we would gather up all kinds of oils and put them together, and then we had to figure out a burning system. So we started with little flappers things, and then we had these like gravity fed lines that went into an old, there was one, I guess, Japanese burner system that was left from my predecessor. And so we tried to make that work, and then I got another oil burner from a furnace company, and we put these two things together, and we made a kiln, and it was able to make temperature, and we had a reduction fired, you know, ethos for a while, okay? Until I think, well, you know, the season of Omar, what was that, 91 or something like that? But anyway, we had a lot of typhoons that season, and Omar took a kiln that was kind of faced like this, and it kind of shifted just like that, you know. So we kind of had to deal with that, and you know, and it blew down the chimneys and all that. So yeah, there was always a lot of repair, and you know, Logan just he lived for that kind of, you know, kind of challenge. And what it was for him was a creative. It was like he was an engineer in the making, you know, because he had this mind to, here's what we're going to do, and here's how I'm going to fabricate it. And the next thing I know, he would come in with specialized braces that he made at home, and you know, these bolts that he had, you know, sized just for this specific place and purpose, and drill them in, and we'd wrap and, you know, put the chimney back on. And he was always bringing in clay samples to, you know, test in the kiln. He was always wanting to be in the studio to do tests. A lot of his creative work was always about testing. He wanted to test different color oxides in clays. He wanted to test different local clays from different areas. He wanted to test different glazes and how to make a glaze. And he got so versed in all of this, he actually took a few of the advanced students and taught them how, you know, sort of glaze chemistry, how to work with all of this.
Nice.
And they learned, and it was wonderful, you know. And I tried to get them to write up all of this. You know, I mean, it's just amazing. But anyway, that's the Logan I knew. And we had, you know, we had some, you know, interesting things. There was a time where, you know, we were going through accreditation, so we had to clean up our area. And, you know, I mean, as an art area, you need stuff and you need space. And we had, you know, we had stuff, but we didn't have space. So it was always compacted and compressed in there for what we needed, you know. The clay orders, you know, I would get clay shipped in from California, and then we'd augment it sometimes with some local clay. During FestPac, which, you know, happened here on Guam in 2016, we had a couple of we had a group of potters from New Zealand, the Maori potters, and then we had a couple of potters from Christmas Island, and then also from Australia, Aboriginal potters who came in. And so I wanted to make some local clay, and so Logan helped me out with that. That was really wonderful. You know, we processed clay, we rolled it on the ground, we mixed it, you know, we mixed in some tempers. It wasn't traditional clay, it was 20th century clay. And then we find out the New Zealand potters, they had their Air Force fly them in, and they brought their own kiln, their own clay.
Oh,
you know,
wow.
they brought like a whole mini studio with them. But it's okay. They still like using our clay. It was kind of a fun venture, you know. And you know, Logan had some issues with transportation, and you know, his time around the university, I would just basically see him in passing. He always had his backpack, and he was always trudging on his way either to the Mark Center or to the library, where he did a lot of his work. He researched, glaze calculation before there was actually a program for glaze calculation. And he could have written a program for glaze calculation if he wanted to. But, anyway, he was, a savant. What would I say? I mean, he had a way of micro-focusing, hyper-focusing that was just really wonderful. And, sometimes we did, like battle heads, because he wanted to do it his way, and I thought it would be. Now they look back on his stupid stuff, But, I guess I heard from his sister that somebody told him he couldn't come to the university anymore, and I feel bad. I told him one semester that we were having accreditation issues, and that this semester wasn't a good semester to be around because we had to tighten everything up. But I never really stopped him. He would come and do sculpture. He actually did this, beautiful Lusong, down on the bottom. He had his own private studio down there. He would just come when he wanted to, and he'd work, do sculpture. He could do clay down there. He could work with people if he wanted to. Built a table that flipped down. He had a pretty open air space with our old kiln that was growing ferns instead of making pottery. It was really, quite beautiful there. And, in retrospect, I'm sorry I never really got to know him better than I knew him like that. He was never open, in terms of family or anything like that. I think I helped him move some things to his house from DRMO once, because, his truck wasn't working. So, we used mine and we moved it all up there. But that was the only time I saw his house, His, a friend of his lived across the street. Her name was Judith Lee. I don't know if any of you knew her, but she taught at, DOE, Department of Education at the time, as a teacher. And she was a potter also, and she did a lot of wood-firing pottery. Found out she had actually an article where she was, involved in what was called a fast-fire wood kiln, but I only got to meet her a couple of times before she relocated to Hawaii. So, I mean, people come and go here. It's just, you kind of get used to the rhythm that, I don't want to say transient, but it's like you got to be in the here and now, It's just like whoever's here, we're with you, and it's really beautiful. And I'm sorry I didn't know Logan was even, having problems with his eyesight and all of that. I just assumed that he stopped driving his truck because it didn't work and he didn't know how to make the connection to get it to the, the repair person. And I'd run into him occasionally, like I'd run into him at Kmart or at Home Depot or something like that. And, it was really a lot of fun. How'd you get here, Logan? Oh, I walked. Do you need a ride? No, I'm good. It's just like...
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you very
that's
much.
I'm sorry, but,
That's great.
I will always, I'll always hold on to those memories. I'm sad that he's gone. I truly am sad.
We really appreciate you
Thank
sharing
you.
that with us.
Interesting.
It means a lot to all of us. Tom, could you come up and say a few words, please?
Yeah, I just, I never...
So, good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Nadeau. I'm the Chief Environmental Public Health Officer with the Division of Environmental Health, Guam Public Health and Social Services. I have my former staff with me, my crew, I guess. Rosanna Robigo, Alma McDonald, Red Valera, and Malou Squads. We know Logan going back at least 1991. For some of us, 1992. So I'll give a little. I didn't write anything down, so everything's through memory and speaking from my heart. So if I go on different stories, I apologize in advance. If my dates cross, I double apologize because it might seem like I'm getting old, because I am as well. First, I remember first time I met Logan was around early 1992. I was going to interview for environmental health specialist. By the way, he was not a public health inspector. Not that it matters, but I think it would matter to him. And you know Logan. He was actually an environmental health specialist, eventually a supervisor. One question he asked me, which was really weird, and it's only later when I picked it up, he asked me, if someone attacks you, what would you do? I said, that is a bizarre question for an interview. I said, well, I'll defend myself. And I thought, oh my God, is this guy I have to worry about when I get employed? He's going to attack me or something? Because he was very stern, somewhat. He was, I mean, not stern, maybe the question was, he's very, not personable. I don't know how best to describe it. He was just kind of reserved. No, not even reserved. He just spoke his word and that was it.
As a matter of fact.
Yeah.
That's the best thing. Matter of fact.
That's my
I
mother.
said, that's a bizarre question. But it's only later on I found out I was being interviewed as a diversion investigator for drugs. So that explained if I was attacked by a drug dealer, what I do kind of thing, right? Nonetheless, I got picked up first day of work, June 1st, 1992. And Logan was not my immediate supervisor, but he was a supervisor. He was one of the senior staff. So, and I always remember Logan in particular about the first 2 years because this is around the time when computer was still relatively new in sense, like Guam. You know, we're still doing everything manually, typewriting.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, all the public health inspectors were using typewriters. So only the environmental specialists were toward technology, which is computer. And at the time, Logan was the only one who actually used computer repeatedly, often, regularly. And there's a computer room. It's like 10 by 10. And he had like 3 computers. One was not working. One was like Windows, maybe one early 95. Another one was like a DOS running on 363. What is that?
Office 365.
Something really old.
Yeah.
So we always wanted that window one. All the young guys, myself, Rosanna, Malou, Alma. We were like, we have to use the new computer because that's what we're used to. And that used to drive Logan crazy because he was the only one that was using a computer at the time in the entire office. So we would hog the computer, and he created a users list. So it's a schedule. I mean, nice.
Yep.
And the idea was, you put your name down on the date you want it. Of course, we young guys, young people, you know, being young, arrogant, obnoxious, and, you know, thinking we're better than the older folks, that we're being smart. So we just filled up all the calendar with our names. And Logan, he just went upset. But he never, think of when Logan is upset, he doesn't get really mad at you. He just looks at you, stands up, and walks away. We thought that was rather unique. But I just heard by someone that he actually had Asperger, right? I think had we known, not to really make a difference at the end, because our division, we're pretty close. I mean, we don't, it's like family, right? We don't always necessarily like the people we work with, but we still respected them and considered part of the family. And Logan was no different. We treated him like we did other supervisors. You know, Logan was just different, we just said. Before back then, we didn't understand the spectrum and all that, but we just said Logan's just different. I mean, we're all different in many ways. So we just accepted him for what he was and who he was, things he said, things he done. But we loved him like a family member, like others. And always remember, you invite him to a party, he'll always show up, right? Doesn't matter who invited him. And it's surprising because none of us really want to go, but Logan would always show up. So that's one thing I think I remember about Logan. I mean, he was, though he never showed it.
There's one funny event in Pyongyang.
Go up, Malu. Go up.
We were invited to attend a fiesta, but I wasn't there. But this is what I heard. It was Eddie Kifuna's house. So while the inspectors, all those people were eating, they saw Logan across eating. He went to the wrong house. So he finished food, then walked across and joined the group. And they were teasing him for many days after that, and he just laughed.
Yeah, he
Did you hear about that?
Thank you for I vaguely remember that story, but thank you for
Good old days.
Good old days.
I
did that too.
Well, one thing I'll say about Logan was he was, if I had any questions, I always turned to him. I mean, not that I disrespect my former supervisor, but because Logan was, when you ask him a question, he always gave a serious response, and if you couldn't, he always looked for it. You know, I mean, he went out of his way.
Yes.
And for him, it was not like he was trying to help me. He just liked to discuss things that he knew, and he's quite knowledgeable. And I remember just picking his brain on a lot of things. And one thing he did, which I found now looking back, I was like, I didn't think much of it. He went through the entire 26 chapters of our statute, of our code. Before he retired, he says, and I think he gave it to me. He said, "These are my suggestions for any future amendment to these statutes." 26.
Wow.
It's like a couple of hundreds of pages, and I still have it because I use it every so often. And it just happens right now we're going through the process of revising our statutes. So, thank you, Logan. Really, it's been helpful. And I'll end it right here because I know others have things to say. But last time I met Logan, without going too much into detail, this is toward when the COVID was kind of winding down. I was in my office, we were still doing counter services, but through the windows or through cars, right? Cars and windows. And someone says, "Tom, there's a guy out there. He doesn't have a car, but he wants service in public health." It's like, what do we do with him? Do we tell him to go get a taxi or something? I said, "Nah, never mind. We had loaner ATV." So I said, "It's open window, so I'll just drive him in." So I went outside, and it was Logan. I said, "Logan, what the hell? I mean, what do you mean you don't have a car? Where's that beat up truck that you have?"
Yeah.
So, because that was always, I was associated with that truck with him. So I'm giving him a ride, and I said, "What happened to the truck?" He said, someone hit him, totaled it, but the insurance would only give me $100 because the car was so old, it had no value. And I said, "So are you going to get a new car?" He says, "No, I take the bus." I said, "Logan, no one takes the bus." But he took the
Logan
bus.
takes the bus.
He took the bus. And I always remember because I had said, sometimes you walk and I said, "Logan, want to ride?" "No, I'm good." And he was serious. It's not like he was trying to say, "No, I don't want to impose upon you." No, you just said, "I was good." And I see him at bus stop on occasion. And, the bus, even now I think, I may be wrong, but so, I'm not sure if it's reliable as it is now as it was before. I don't know if it's as reliable as everyone thinks it is, but I just remember him waiting for buses, and
Forever.
I always felt bad. But at the same time, I said, "That's just Logan." Just the way he was. Anyway, I'll end it here, and I thank you, Dave, for telling me. I had no idea he had passed. Saddened
Thank you for coming.
and disappointed, not knowing in advance, and like you, sir, I feel terrible that
He
I heard
passed,
this way,
right?
but
It's
Thank you
just
all
like a
for
loss.
coming.
We appreciate
Just a
it.
note on the bus schedule. Logan had the bus schedule memorized.
Yeah, no doubt.
If you ask him what he was doing, he would cite you the bus schedule. I really think it's appropriate, and we're very honored that Lynn Tucker, Logan's sister, has joined us. So, Lynn, would you care to come up and just say what you feel?
Once I get started, y'all might as well just grab your blankets and pillows, because I grew up with him, right?
Remember this?
So we have quite the collection here of pieces that Logan made. And this is the one that I have been coveting since I saw it a year ago. And his neighbor has been saving it. She didn't know she was saving it for me. And I've gotten my packing figured out. This is going on the plane with me Tuesday.
It should, yes.
Beautiful.
And
That's
it's
a
going to
beauty.
make it in one piece. So it's heavy. But if you guys want to look at it more, I'm not passing it around. Somebody else
Maybe
can
Joe
hold
can
it
hold
and
it.
let you look at it. But that is, to me, the most wonderful of all of his interestingly unique pieces. So, and I enjoyed hearing you guys talking about him because I have more of a childhood type memory and family history memory. And so hearing about working for him, I'm sorry, man.
We loved him.
I'm really sorry. My first memory of him is we lived up in Agania Heights next to the Masonic Temple. There used to be a house there. And then we would walk down the hill to Adelup School. So he's 5 years older than I am. So when I was starting first grade, walking down the register, he said, you get back there. And I had to walk way behind him. And that's my first memory. He was a mean big brother, and I was a pesky little sister. And it stayed that way forever. It seriously did. So some folks know and some don't that I came here last April, so it's been a year, and took him to Houston to go to MD Anderson Cancer Hospital. And they pretty much had his cancer under control, and then he got a big massive lung infection. And he couldn't battle that anymore. So that's that story. And he was generous. So let me back up a little bit. He retired when he was 48.
Very young.
Because that original GovGuam pension program,
25 years, yeah.
his pension was higher than his salary.
Yeah.
And it took him 2 weeks to give his notice. And he was gone. And that was what did it. So while he was retired, he also got involved because he likes rocks. He's always liked rocks. He had a tumbler,
Yeah.
make Mom so angry because his tumbler was sitting on the table in the laundry room where she couldn't fold clothes. Great. But he joined a archaeological dig that was happening in Montana at the biggest dinosaur
That's right. I
find
remember that.
that was known at the time. And I think it was about 10 years. He went to that dig. And when he'd fly to the States, one year he'd fly into California to see Mom and his sister. And then next year he'd fly to Seattle to see me and just switch back and forth. And he had made an electronic cat feeder. Are you surprised?
No, not at all.
So the feeder would feed these cats for 6 days. It had a timer in it. Food would come out for breakfast. Food would come out for dinner. And he would never stay stateside more than 6 days. Because he had to get home to make sure the cats got fed. Yeah, they were just the feral cats of the neighborhood. So he went to this, dinosaur dig every year, supervisor, team leader, all those things that he had the skill to become. And then there was a big political kerfuffle between the University of Montana and the First Nations people. And I can't remember exactly which group it was, of whose land it was on. And these dinosaurs, they were in a sacred place for the First Nations peoples, so they had to stop the dig. And his archaeologist suggested he go to Wyoming. He went 1 year. He never went back again. It wasn't the same. It wasn't his people. It wasn't his people.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's interesting to hear you guys talk about him this way. So his pottery is what I was going to also focus on, because when we were finding it as I cleaned out his house, there were boxes of it lining 3/4. I mean, you could go up the stairs this much, and all the rest of it was boxes of hiking clothes, hiking boots, things that he had bought at Ross, never wore. So we gave them to a charity. But then we started to find boxes of the pottery, and in the closets upstairs and places like that. And I was the first, I think, that some people knew that was such a high point in his life. Yeah. And I've got one other piece at home that I snitched when I was here. Actually, I snitched it in April. But so we're gonna try to gather up more, because he wants to do, I'm sorry, your name again?
Lewis. Yeah,
Lewis, yeah,
I'd
Lewis.
like to, I'm a board member at the
Yeah.
Isla Center
So
for
he's
the
gonna-
Arts, and
Good.
we do art shows, and I was talking with Velma, and I think it's a great idea. We're trying to put together an alumni show. So I'd like to get some of his work just on loan from whoever has it to put together an exhibition of his, you know, and even, you know, to get a little bit of this background story would be really wonderful up there
and
on
if
the
you
wall.
want to donate it, they keep a
Right,
a
we have a
library.
Some
permanent,
there.
we have a permanent collection.
permanent collection.
yeah.
So
But,
you're going to have to settle for photos.
I was gonna
No,
say.
no. That one should go
Because
home
if,
with
if
you.
you
That's a
want
beauty.
that one, it's going to be in Washington.
That's good. Good on you. Okay.
Yeah. But I also can get you photos. No, I might not be able to
No,
because it's
it's-
already in storage because I've got another piece. It was a lady.
Yeah, he had a mold that
Yeah.
he carved a couple of figures, you know, and he made a two-piece mold so that he would be able to press clay in and make multiples of these.
Ah,
okay.
This
interesting.
incredible lady.
Yeah.
Fashioned as if she was maybe 1700s native person. The facial structure, the facial features, you know, a little bit slant eyes, and just
Yeah.
really, she was not a modern woman, and kind of a gown, fabric, you
Yeah.
know, sort of thing, in folds.
Wow.
But in his world of generosity, he will do anything to help that you asked him to.
Yeah,
So on one
absolutely.
of these trips where he's coming back to the States, he was coming my way, and I had just bought my house in Seattle. And that was quite the feat because a single person affording a mortgage, even in 94.
Yeah.
No, it's pretty amazing. Anyway, but I also had a big octopus furnace. I don't know how many people.
Oh, I know what it is. Yeah.
So it's this big thing, this big around and this tall, and then the vents that go upstairs to the rooms are this big, and they just go across the basement like this to the room.
That's
In
right.
any way, you come down the stairs, and you have to duck because there's a vent there, and the vents are coated in asbestos.
Oh, not good.
And then there's asbestos lining inside. So Seattle had or has asbestos removal abatement educator.
Right.
So I took all the information, I did everything we had. I went to the safety store for construction people, and I bought us our breathing masks and our zoot suits and you know the whole thing. And I said, Logan, when you come, you're going to help me take out this furnace. It was July.
awesome.
And so that's how we spent our time together, was ripping out this furnace and packaging up all the asbestos properly and you know all that kind of stuff.
That's
And
great.
It's just like whatever. Okay.
Fine with him.
Yeah.
Fine with me.
Got a
Yeah,
job.
yeah. So there was that story, and then I guess as a family, one of our worst stories, because of his Asperger's, he did what he wanted to do when he wanted to do it, and nothing else in between. So it was Christmas. All of us kids are 14, 10, even 8. He wouldn't get out of bed. And we threw water on him, we turned the radio on loud, we ripped the covers off of him. After each one of these ran for our lives, because he'd come flying out of bed down the hallway after us, and then he'd go back to bed. And we'd do it again. And that's how Christmas went that year anyway. So you know, he could be fun, but then
Yeah.
again. So I think, yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
you would have to
Thank
do it.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You've gotten more on his pottery than what I thought I was even going to be able to cover. So that's been great, you
Thank you
guys.
so much.
It's okay. There's
Joe Vince, I know, wants to say
They're
a few
beautiful.
words.
I do.
They
That'd
were
be great.
beautiful.
Just a few,
They're all
Joe.
beautiful.
Just a few, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll go over his hiking stick first.
Those are the hiking sticks.
So we first met Logan when we arrived in 2000, when we hiked a lot with him, with my wife Sarah and our 2 children, Joey and Lily. The kids thought Logan was so interesting. First, they loved his old pickup. It was so boony.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It had like moss and little pieces of
And it was
trees
green.
growing out of it.
Yes, and it was green.
Yes, and it was green. And the kids thought it was so cool because he had packed all things next to the seat, and so there really wasn't much place to sit.
Right.
And the back of the pickup bed had all kinds of weird things he found on the road, scrap metal and just junk.
Yep.
So Logan, but one thing he really liked to talk about was his hiking stick. And so you'll see, of course, he had it here. And in this stream, he was telling Reed how this stick, he put it together with pipe threads and it would fold up for the bus. And so he'd be able to take this on the bus. And he would tell us all about what type of wood to use. And then on the end, he had different ends where he had a drill bit that was a carbide concrete bit that would dig into the stone.
Into the soil.
And
Yes,
so
yes.
he would tell us all about that. And then this trip, he took us down to get bay rum. So this is bay rum. It only grew on the Fonte Dam, and we went down looking for it to make a hiking stick. And of course, I put in a carbide drill bit, and it worked really well.
Yeah.
And so anyway, hiking sticks were always a fun conversation. The Lusung, I got to actually go over to the lab, to your lab, and I sat down. I had time that day. I was in no rush, and he explained to me how he worked on this piece of basalt that he got from Mount Aludum, which
That's
is
right.
super heavy. It's over 100 pounds. And he worked for 160 hours hitting it.
That's right.
And he showed me that you can't hit too hard
That's
because
right,
you might.
because you fracture it. Yes.
Yeah.
And so he worked on that for 160 hours, and he had a little logbook.
Yes, he did.
Did he kept?
Yes, he did. And, you know, I mean, he was meticulous about it had to be a perfect circle, okay?
Yes.
It-
Yeah, and he had the chalk lines
Yes.
out, and he was telling me, and he tried different pieces. One was too hard or too soft, but it's perfect. And so if you look at that, when you look at an ancient one at Paget,
Yeah, you have to appreciate the amount of time that went into making it. Yes.
it was just awesome.
Yeah.
What's it used for?
It's like a grinding stone. So
Medicine.
Like a mortar and pestle
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
of the
right.
ancient times.
Yeah.
Mostly for medicine.
Medicine.
Yeah.
Mostly. Yeah.
So our previous president Reed used to he had a nickname for Logan. It was the professor, and that was perfect because Logan
He knows
he
everything.
knew a lot about a lot of different things and studied them and recorded them, and it's just amazing.
It's so fun. And then just while we'd hike, we'd sometimes bring up the most random things. And one day it was about what he added to oatmeal. Anyway, we're just hiking, and he's talking to us about the weirdest things that he would use with instant oatmeal. And I used cranberries, and what was it, like tomatoes, and just things
He was
you
a
wouldn't.
healthy eater.
Frozen mixed vegetables.
Yeah,
Those
frozen.
packets.
Yes, yes.
I mean, he
Nasty
really did.
things that we call food.
But he was
Well,
just
frozen
always eater.
vegetables aren't bad, okay? They're captured right at the height of their,
That's
you know,
right.
picking.
But he really was. He was a healthy eater and stuff. But he had his ways of.
Oh,
He had
he
a
had-
refrigerator. How big was his refrigerator? Like it was
Yeah,
just
but
a
he did-
college-sized one,
He
right?
did fast
So because of his
You know, come on.
because of his hoarding and his embarrassment, he knew he was different. He knew how people generally lived and kept their house. He didn't let anybody come to his house. That you were there once is amazing, Louis.
Yeah,
But
I didn't get to go inside. I got to go to the carport.
yeah. So his refrigerator died. When it died, it was probably already 30 years old, and he couldn't get it out. So it sat there for probably, I'm gonna guess now, since I heard about it, 15 years.
Oh my God.
With the door closed. And he bought this little refrigerator that sat on top of the counter. and he would buy, each week he would buy 3 Subway sandwiches, cut them in half, and put them in his refrigerator, and he'd eat a half for lunch and he'd eat a half for dinner, and he would rotate them in the refrigerator between the freezer and the refrigerator so that they'd stay real cold but they wouldn't freeze.
I love it.
So the lettuce didn't get
Wilt, yeah.
slimy.
But he would explain that to us thoroughly.
Thoroughly,
Heard the
yes,
explanation.
yes.
He had an order to things, and he really
No, it was all thought out. It was, you know, all thought out.
Meticulous.
And even when, so this year that he's been with me in Houston, or I've been with him in Houston, I don't want Houston kids, he's in assisted living, so he wasn't needing to do things like that to feed himself. He wouldn't go to Sub Sandwich. He wouldn't go to Subway when we were going out to lunch together or something. And I'm trying to think of things that he likes.
yeah.
No. But I came in one time to visit him. He had a bottle washer, but the handle was too short. You know, the standard handle to get into those half-gallon jugs of iced tea. So I find him sitting in the chair in the patio with a stick he had picked up from the yard and a rock. And he was sanding the stick with the rock, smoothing it out, getting rid of the bump and stuff, and is going to be going then into the thing so he could wash out the half-gallon jugs because he was keeping them.
Yeah.
Starting
Great.
the hoarding, he was keeping the half-gallon jugs. He was
Might
bringing
have a use
back
for
to
them.
his room packets of sugar and other things. It didn't stop.
Unique character, but
Unique character is
unique
absolutely
character,
right.
and he was just so great with the kids, and he will be missed.
We will miss him.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. That was very sweet.
Is there anybody else who would like to mention anything about Logan? I do want to thank you, and I do want to end this remembrance appropriately, so I would like to say a prayer for Logan. If you could all stand up, please. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Merciful Father and Lord of all life, we praise you that we are made in your image and reflect your truth and light. We thank you for the life of your child Logan, for the love he received from you and showed amongst us. Above all, we rejoice at your gracious promise to all your servants living and departed, that we shall rise again at the coming of Christ. And we ask that in due time we may share with our brother that clear vision when we shall see your face in the same Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming again. We did schedule this if you want to rush up the hill to see the
Or
sunset.
even out to that other bench, there it might be
Right there, yeah.
a little bit left
Other than
there.
that, we don't have streetlights ordered for tonight. So the sun is going down, which means less light.
If you want some iced tea,
Yeah, there's
Thank you.
want to take a